Hey, good morning, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is the Foundation's Q&A check-in for October 15th, 2023, the Ides of October. It just turned to fall this year, so I needed my fleece jacket and sweatpants to troop the line yesterday at the soccer fields. I was there for about 4 hours, got 15,000 steps in. And more importantly, 2 hot dogs and a bag of chips. Do not tell my wife. That's my guilty pleasure. Well, there were no questions sent that I saw, so I was reviewing slides and things we'd talked about in previous sessions that I wanted to highlight on, so I want to kind of rapidly go through some of those to see what triggers with you, but also to do a little housekeeping. I want to talk a little bit about learning from a different point of view. I love this diagram here. This is what I usually help my Army officers with when they are becoming organizational leaders and field grade officers responsible for the, they work for a colonel and they're a major and they have captains underneath them with lots of soldiers. And so we normally think of this as the direct action leader, the guy who's responsible for the performance of the mission of those soldiers. And he's organized in a unit that has a singular focus. Like if he's an infantryman, he's doing an infantry job. That's like his thing. Or he's an artilleryman or a mortarman doing whatever. Or he's a mechanic. They have a maintenance unit. So ordinarily, we organize that unit to really focus on one thing. And I think of that as a trading system. And our job is in the world of military requirements. If there's a situation over here, we want to get the right kind of unit into that mission area in order to achieve whatever successful end state we want. So we can think about optimizing that unit, we can think about training it, we can think about leading it. And it turns out that there are 4 things that determine how good that organization is. It's the level of training and their proficiency. It's the quality of their leadership. It is their degree of discipline. And then it is their internal warrior spirit, which is the willingness to do whatever must be done and the commitment to victory. It takes all 4 of those things for that organization to be good. And whatever the weakest part of that 4 is how good the organization is. Like if I have the willingness to endure combat, and if I have the discipline to do exactly as my leaders tell me and to stop when they tell me to stop and to go when they tell me to go with perfect discipline, and if my leaders put me in the right place at the right time and give me the good orders, but I'm not trained, then I fail. Because I don't know how to do the thing that I was put there to do. Yeah, but what if I was skilled in exactly what had to be done, and my leaders put me in the right place at the right time with the good orders, and I could start and stop on time and apply things correctly with self-aware discipline, but I lack the will to do what must be done. I don't have the fighting spirit to endure. Then we fail because I am frozen. I can't act and follow through and do what must be done. But if I'm well trained and I have the willingness to do things and I perfectly respond to excellent orders, but I get bad leaders who put me in the wrong spot or to give me bad guidance, then we fail. But if I have great leaders and I'm well trained and I have the warrior spirit, but I lack the ability to start and stop according to those orders, I become overwhelmed by the situation that I'm in. I lose mindful awareness. Then we fail. So it turns out that if I could measure those 4 qualities on some scale, and my profile looks something like this, training, leadership, warrior spirit, and discipline, then my level of proficiency is right there, because that's the level at which I get to. There's such a strong connection between the world of this experience and the trading that this pertains. So there's probably a direct connection between those 4 and the world of trading. And one of the things that we want to do in our self-assessment is gather evidence that we can use to say, am I really as well trained? Do I really understand the rules of the system and can perform them with the tools that I have? I include in that the use of your trading platform. It's error-free performance. Do I have a good planning process that lets me know where in the world the opportunity is, which comes with danger? So am I aligned with where the opportunity? In some ways, that's the search for the compound critical state, because it's in those compound critical states that the likelihood of an amazing move is maximized compared to other locations. Where is it hot? Where are the things in play but have paused for a moment, perhaps in a doji? Yes, in a doji. That gives us, in that bright, shining moment, the smallest amount of indecision for the greatest possible returns in either direction. And as long as I can have no directional bias, then I'm good. Do I have the willingness to endure the pain and suffering that comes from trading when I'm on the wrong side of the trade for a while? And can I get to the other side of the trade with no loss of my training and leading and discipline? Do I have enough in the tank in my warrior spirit to endure? And then do I have the discipline to continue to pull the trigger after a losing series of trades that are still within the statistical norm? Like if I have a coin flip that pays 3-2 and I see 4 losses in a row, there's a probability in 1,000 trades of how many 4 trade losses I'm going to experience. It's a worthwhile experience to set that up in a spreadsheet to test that, to see how many actually occur, and yet have the 1,000 trade data set still be 50-50 that pays 3-2. It's worthwhile understanding the mathematics of trends and streaks to see what you really can expect to get. That turns out to be almost impossible for the untrained mind to really appreciate just how variable those streaks can be. I'll probably run that for I have a spreadsheet somewhere that shows it. If you don't know how to do that in a spreadsheet, you should learn, because it'll teach you something about spreadsheets and math, and it leads to something that is a persistent edge, and that is simple descriptive math and spreadsheets. So in the world of direct action leaders, then a unit, which we could think of in those terms, that's going to perform a task and achieve results, we can assess that. How well are we doing those four things? And that's part of that plan, prepare, execute. The assessment of it is absolutely crucial. If you do all these three things correctly, you plan well, prepared, and executed, but you lack the assessment, in the same way that these four elements determine how good you are overall for the long haul, whichever one of those four you are least proficient on, let me say it that way, that's the one that needs work. That's where the greatest possible return for the long run is going to be. Because as the world moves, you want to be able to move with it, but if you can't assess what the world is doing, then you don't have the data that feeds the planning process, which is giving you the targets that you're going to prepare, which gives you the trades that you're going to execute. But that's really, the assessment is part of the how do I find the area in which I have compound critical it's assessment. How do I measure my internal processes to see where I need to self-develop? If this, not just the world of trading opportunities, but is the world of professional competence, how do I assess where the area of the compound critical state in my own performance is? What do I need to work on? So if we think of this as direct action, the whole intention of that is to come up with one good system which works in one particular set of circumstances, and then make damn sure that when those circumstances occur, that I can get that unit into it and I can get that system working. The world of colonels, the senior leaders, are in the long run to make sure that we are looking at the right targets and the right goals and end states, and to make sure that we are getting the resources available so that whenever we take action, that we're getting all of these things, all of these different actions aligned in order to achieve those goals. An instructive moment in history occurred in the middle of World War II when General Eisenhower took command of he was the supreme Allied commander in Europe, and he was given instructions in 1942 which said, your job is to conduct military operations to seize and maintain a foothold in the continent of Europe, and then conduct military operations in a series of campaigns to defeat the Axis powers until they unconditionally surrender. Ready, go. I flipped the page over, there was nothing on the other side, and it said, except, get to work. So that was in 1942. We had just entered the war, and the Battle of Britain was raging, and Germany had dominated everything and was kicking the shit out of Russia. And yet those were his words. So what happens is D-Day and then the rest of the war. So his job was was getting the right goals in the right sequence, and then aligning and getting the most out of the resources that were provided. And then the plan was how you got from point A to point B. So that's what senior leaders are doing, is getting all the resources, ensuring that we're aligned, and then synchronizing all of those activities in time and space with a good enough plan, which is definitive enough that we know what to do once he's done talking, but flexible enough so that the genius of our organizational leaders have the flexibility to use the resources, the units that we have in creative and clever ways, learning from our experience and get going. So what I spend my time in the service doing is understanding what colonels and generals should be telling us and ensuring that our captains have what they need to be trained to assist them to develop, but also to come up with suitable, feasible, and acceptable plans that become well prepared, that can be executed, and that we are assessing the effects that these guys are achieving so that we can update the plan to ensure that we are on the path towards the goals that are directed by senior leaders, colonels and generals, on behalf of the nation. The guys that I'm working with have been successful in this area, but not in this area. And they have to learn a new set of skills, knowledge, and attributes in order to become successful with an entirely different mission set, which is how to manage a lot of these, how to plan and organize them in time and space. So when I ask them to make that transition, I say, look, you got to understand that you work for the boss. And when we're thinking about the time that you're spending, there are times when you're making sure that you're doing exactly what the boss told you to do. But we also need you to work on the things that you know that you have to do, that you've told the subordinates to do, and make sure that they're doing that. So you got to take care of the requirements, the mandatories. And then if the boss has given you goals to work on that says, once we've taken care of these mandatories, I want you thinking about how to work on these other things on my list that need discretion so that I can be successful at my area. I'm looking for your creative insights. So we got to do what he's asked us to with our discretionary time. He's given us room to decide what we should do next for his mission. So we got to take care of that. And then once we've satisfied 1, 2, and 3, we got to work on the things that we think are the most important for our subordinates and for our boss. That's where we get maximum discretion. And our job is to become proficient enough that we can start maximizing these things. Your discretionary time after you've taken care of these other drivers. So this is living in different time streams in a world in which you're kind of in the middle of, you have a boss, but you're somebody's boss, and you're trying to take care of your soldiers, and you're also trying to help them unleash their creativity so that they can be creative on the things that you told them to do. So you got to give them guidance and discretion so that they can discover their inner genius and learn how to do things in a different way. Do they have the spark of inspiration? Because some of those guys are going to be selected to become majors. And it is a irony or a truth that the thing that makes these guys successful are the biggest obstacles to overcome when they become majors. They want to be told what to do. And yet, I need them to discover what must be done and to learn how to do it on their own so that they can seize opportunities that they are the first ones to see. Like, if they're waiting for me to tell them how to be creative about their job, then who's doing my job? If I'm doing their job, who's doing my job? Well, part of my job is to make them successful and to make those guys successful. And if I'm taking care of guys above me and below me, then I'm probably going to be successful. But how I do that now becomes an area of great concern because I'm in the middle of the mess and I'm trying to discover what should be done. And how often is that a one-off thing, and what are the systematic things that I need to improve on? So that is the real challenge of organizational leaders, is how to connect the world of strategy and the world of execution. I know that in the battle of trading, that if I can be systematic with a really good set of rules that I'm disciplined on, that are informed by math, and I have the ability to assess, and I can be ruthless, I know that we're going to win in the long run. As long as I'm trading at a level of risk, that keeps me in the game, then my long-term advantage is going to win in the world of tactics. I'm going to win a little bit more than the other guy. I'm going to lose a little less. And in the long run, that's going to lead to an equity curve. So I got to make sure that I'm not taking excessive risk. I got to make sure that I'm trading in an area that gives me enough opportunities. I got to make sure that I'm trading at a high enough level of risk so that when I get the positive results, I can make meaningful progress, even when that feels uncomfortable. And then I also got to make sure that the things that we're doing and the results we are getting remain aligned with the larger strategy, and be creative in finding ways to improve that make me more aligned. And really make sure that the results that I'm getting help us understand what we mean by the things that we value, so I can engage. And then I got to have the ability to progress through my life to become expert down here, so that I can learn how to blend 3 different systems together, and then get the synergy of those 3 things, so that when the world moves into this area, I can use that system, and the world moves over here, I can use that system. Or when it calls for some combination of those 3, I get the right asset allocation. And then I got to learn how to make sure that I can discover my own identity and values as they shift through time, and make sure that the strategic goals and things that I'm working on, so that I can be the boss of me, so that I can come up with those goals and think larger than just the tactical trader. I can think about being the owner, or the servant to the owner if she's my wife. So what that means is that I've got to know where my values are and what my identity is, that little guy in the middle. And then I got to know where my area of professional competence is. And then I got to know the area where, in that blue dotted line, where I can be learning and exploring and expanding, so that I can get better. And that means that there are times when I have to deliberately engage, coming out of my protective shell, and expand into the wider world around me in order to explore it systematically, in order to take good notes and come back and study, so that I can learn how to do things to expand my competence, so that there's more things that I can do, so that I can start having multiple systems, and then a system of systems. I can use Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People to adopt a mindset and principles and a spirit of learning that continuous improvement is influenced by his. Get better with the tools that I have. Aggressively seek out opportunities before it becomes a disaster and then I have to respond in a crisis. Go find what needs to be done. Don't wait for it to come to you. Beginning with the end in mind, whether that means that I've started with a clear understanding of who I am and what my values are, and then I work backwards to find the methods and the ways and means at my disposal to come up with methods that are going to get me reliably to there, but always remembering why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, to find the energy to persist as I learn how to get better. And then doing first things first, and that says setting up. I got to have the foundations if I want to build that house of trading that's going to stand the test of time when the big bad wolf comes and the lightning and thunder comes up to cloud up and rain all over me. If that thing I still want it to stand, I got to have sound foundations. But I also got to take care. I got to get some shelter first while I'm learning the things to build the longer term. So I got to be able to. I got to do this thing in phases so that I can make money along the way, so that the first system I'm on can be making money to help fund and sustain me as I continue to grow. And I got to find ways to do win-win, aligning with other traders to realize that we don't have to take this on ourselves. But how can I turn my weakness into a strength? Maybe if I find the area where my system is really performing well, but I find out that there are certain circumstances in which that thing just does not work at all. Well, maybe I can learn, to take the other side of the trade when the evidence says that's what's working. The other guy's making money off me. Well, maybe I can establish a firewall and only trade it this way when it's working, and then adopt a different mindset when it goes that way. So maybe I can take my underperformance and from that determine that there are ways in which I can get better. It took me 5 years of successfully trading the 5-day D swing trade to discover that the 5DDF, when that trade failed, that the other side of the trade was even better than the positive expectancy of the 5DD. And it had to, by understanding the conditions under which failures were large, that a new system, a contingency system, could be there. And that was hard to do, and I had to be proactive with that. I had to learn to study a successful system in order to discover what was beyond the next. You know, if you have a system that doesn't work, it's easy to figure out what is working. It's the other guy's trade. He's fading me. But it was really hard to get past the success of a positive expectancy system to discover where other opportunities were. And when I became systematic in that way, it helped me loosen the hold that a positive system had on me, that I could look at it just as, hey, that's just one thing of the things that I do. I can actually find another system that's adjacent to it, and under certain circumstances trade that one instead. And maybe that led to another one, and pretty soon I started populating the world market model of opportunities with systems that could work under different circumstances. And then I didn't throw those rule sets away. I just waited for the market to move where it was going to, and then used the system that was appropriate for the circumstances that we're in. Like after COVID, volatility in the markets changed in the swing time frame. That volatility prior to COVID was looking like this. And if you put some little bracket around that, you could say, hey, most of the time the market volatility was in like that, and then you had a couple moments when it tested the edges of volatility, and then the reversion to the mean was really powerful. After COVID, when you look at the slope of the 30-period regression line, which I take to be the health of the market, it looks like this. And what used to be the normal limits of volatility really needed to be adjusted out to here if you were going to pick plus or minus 1 or 2 standard deviations, that the limits of normal were now just nothing special. Well, if you had been a student of the markets and you studied that, and you came up with a black box rule set which said, when this thing gets to the edge of volatility or extreme performance, sell your position and fade it, and that worked really, really well pre-COVID, that'll get you murdered in the world after COVID, because the amplitude of volatility changed, and the frequency with which it changed. The frequency changed. It got twice as frequent and twice as large. So there was almost like conceptually a 4 times difference in volatility between pre-COVID and post-COVID. If you didn't study that, you might not know that, because the day-to-day change in volatility, there was an initial system shock which killed a lot of people, got them out of the markets altogether. He said, I can't trade this anymore because all of these mathematically proven systems aren't working anymore. They're out to get me, and then they just stopped trading. And meanwhile, after the bottom came in, there was a 75% move just to get back to the level where price used to be. But then this volatility continued to persist. And then if you lived in that for 6 months, you became accustomed to that and it felt normal. Things that used to be abnormal are now the new normal. Well, how did you navigate that transition? Well, we navigated it because we had an instrument that measured aspects of market volatility that were tuned to the rate and magnitude of change in the market that allowed us to adapt to the new swing. That's why I'm doing hybrid swings with 30-minute bars now, is because that turned out to be the time frame that allowed me to get maximum performance out of the new normal. That swings needed to be captured, that there was no longer this long-term buy and hold or long-term avoid of months and months and quarters at a time. It was weekly or periodic swing. It now became conditions-based, that I couldn't rely on the time frame that the move was going to unfold. I could just say, this is the size of the normal move, and it could happen in 1/5 of the time or in double the time, but it was the conditions that triggered the trade and not periodic rebalancing according to a calendar. Well, that was a fundamental shift in the nature of markets that you only get through constant assessment and comparison of the assessment against a standard of judgment, and then having standards that could adapt to changes in the underlying marketplace. That's what assessment really means, is being alert to conditions that tell you the circumstances are changing. How do you know those things? Well, you got to maximize that discretionary time to take care of things that the senior advisor is telling you, but you also got to be out there because you're a scout, responsible for studying that area outside your own expertise, because you know that better than anybody. And you got to start looking for evidence around you about should I go this way or should I go that way? So you got to start scanning that sector and learning to look for what seem like opportunities that need investigation, because it's not absolute. There's not a big signpost that says, hey, there's gold over here, come and get it. You learn that those are usually not necessarily true. There might be gold over here, so how can I investigate that without betting the whole farm? How do I learn to split my production asset allocation to my scout asset allocation, and then blend that into a whole that allows me to do both of those, and then periodically improve my production by taking the things that the scout found and turning it into a production system. That's a different mindset than it takes to be a scout. So how do I get those things? I got to have an experience base. Hey, that means I got to have artifacts and results that are timely and accurate and complete and reliable so that I can perform research and turn experience into knowledge. And then I got to be able to rapidly design systems that might work, and then learn how to test systems to see if they work. And then I got to learn how to scale those. Oh, I got to have skills. I got to have design thinking and so I got to have skill sets that support research and innovation and mathematics. And then I got to have a voice of intent that tells me, am I really connected between the world of tactics and strategy? Have I really aligned myself with what's most important, or am I off chasing rabbits because they got my attention? There's a discipline in not doing things that you want to do, but which you shouldn't do now. Because that's what alignment means. It means going after the things that need to be done and not the things that you want to do. Now, it would be nice that if the things I want to do and like to do and I'm good at doing, if those things were also something I need to do, well, that's great. But understanding the difference between those, understanding what it is you need to do first as the driver of informed action. So I need to blend all four of those voices into an ecosystem of learning and changing so that I can change with the world as fast as the world changes, but not faster, and then in an effective direction and continually get better. So it's out of that kind of exploration that we discovered the world of the risk Z, which looked at the nature of market volatility and was able to come up with some kind of 4 seasons of MACD, the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall. And there's the zero line, which told us that we could expect to have these different kinds of feelings, and that when we were feeling, or when people were feeling the worst, was really the time to be looking for the transition. When it can't get any worse, maybe it could get better. Or when we are feeling the height of elation, that's the time to make sure that we've locked in our gains because the fall and winter are coming. So the risk Z, measuring performance characteristics of the VIX, sort of also led us to the idea of MACD histogram, which was looking at price. And there's a relationship between volatility and price performance in that typically over large caps and indexes, that when volatility increases in the short term, price performance decreases. Like short-term volatility bad. Well, if I know that, and if I had made money on trades that were working as volatility was dormant and then volatility starting to rise, I need to shift to systems that'll work when volatility is rising, even if that means just putting a stop and protecting my gains and then not trading that. That's a strategy. That's a system. Don't trade bad systems in high volatility markets. Don't trade low volatility systems in high volatility markets. That's a system. It wins by not losing. Now, maybe I can affirmatively do something with volatility to make affirmative money while it's doing it, but maybe the best thing to do is just avoid the 80% loss of the internet. So anyway, it's these kinds of discoveries before you need them that's being proactive. Sharpening the saw is becoming proficient and improving the techniques. Like, we're into about a 9-month process right now with Chris White at EdgeRaider. And Phil and Griff, who are doing the Kata 2 course for me, which is a distilled version of the system that I'm teaching you in here with the collapsing dragon, or the supported spring crossing, which when it works leads to Kata 2s, which when it fails leads to collapsing dragons. After a harsh winter, that system is sufficient in order to have a system that works, that allows you to understand the principles of the foundations of trading, which includes system, self, and market. So it's just enough so that you can then explore the world of psychology and markets and systems. Well, Phil and Griff have turned that system into a bulletproof, concise 6-week course on foundations of trading, which is, and the reason I used to teach all of this and all of that in one 3-day weekend workshop for $3,500. So cut that in half, and that's why the Foundations course and the Kata 2 course are what they are. So you're getting 2 courses for the price of one. And this gives you broadness, just enough depth in order to see the wide world of what it is you need to be working on long term, while this one gets you going on a good enough system that might be all you ever need. My experience has been that this can be overwhelming if you don't also have the larger ecosystem foundation. So, well, that's in its 4th or 5th iteration. It's working fine. They actually built a Thinkorswim platform for people that use Ameritrade. So they're sharpening their saw. The act of teaching it is sharpening their saw. And now Phil, who's a CTA, gets a hold of Chris White, who uses an Excel-based platform called Ed, and he's created EdgeRaider, and he has several thousands of people that use his toolkit, which now adds backtesting to the mix in Excel to rapidly investigate ideas. And he's built with Phil a complete set of templates of my work from the daily report that now works in EdgeRaider and also allows you to backtest. And we're getting ready to release that toolkit, and we just got to figure out how to get us all paid for all that hard. But that's been a 9-month project that Phil and Griff have been taking the lead on. And I stayed out of it to make sure that they were developing the skills to deliver that project and set up their own business to do that. That whole thing comes out of the Creativity 202 course, was the ability to relax and let them do that, because I was starting with the end in mind, which was to expand our circle of competence so that if I have another heart attack, that this whole thing doesn't stop just because I chose to die. Well, fortunately, we started that 9 months ago, so that 2 months ago when I had the heart attack, that this stuff could all continue to go without me. You know, it sucks to not be needed, but I'm trying to add value by keeping them under guidance. Well, I say all that simply to say that all of these things that I'm talking about here are part of the process that we're using to expand the ecosystem that is concerned with tortoise-style trading, but also, I think legitimately, the things that Phil and Griff are doing, that they're discovering, that they're bringing into the system, into the ecosystem, and that the things that my brother is doing with options and 3-day, 9-day trading into the ecosystem, that Bill Scheidt and Jeff Boccaccio are doing with the PRX system. And, you know, it's really the opposite. I just look at the way I'm trading. That's just one of the ways in which this community of practice, which we're calling the OWL now, is trying to expand the size of our ecosystem. And what I would just tell you is that the lifetime access that you have for the Foundations course, as long as I'm alive and those guys are alive, is going to include the things that we're discovering along the way, which means that it's not just the SSC, Kata 2, and Collapsing Dragon system intraday, but this is a fractal pattern that is concerned with the larger issue of a compound critical state. That this is just the intraday way of trading, that is just one manifestation of how to exploit human psychology in market conditions under certain circumstances. It turns out that the 3-day, 9-day patterns that my brother's got, you know, which we're calling the sniper system, is simply another way to exploit the fractal nature of these, but on different time dimensions. And what Bill and Jeff are doing with the PRX system is geared towards circumstances in which the market is doing this. What they're doing is really a derivative of the Kata 2 mindset, which says that's the one that gives you the most opportunities in bullish markets, and that if you expand your view in crypto to a lot of crypto coins, and you find the ones that are in these conditions of a long, strong bull that is featuring Kata 2s, and you can stay with that as long as it's doing that, as long as you are rigorous on adjusting your stops. And when that no longer works, go find the coins that are now working. That's the essence of the PRX system that uses end of day and end of week time frames to trade. What ties all of these things together are some of the principles and the concepts that you're being exposed to in the very broad Foundations course. But just being exposed to those principles and getting width is not sufficient. You also have to have depth to get to a workable system. Last sessions, in the last 2 sessions where I talked about those patterns, there's actually enough information in there for you to get it, in my opinion. And then if you watch what I'm doing every night in the Nightly Strategy podcast with the 30-minute charts on the hybrid swing system, all I'm doing is exactly this. I'm looking for compound critical states from a set of about 30 symbols, which I'm ready to trade all the time, and some of them are continuation patterns, and some of them are new starts, and I'm using the old reliables. Those are the 3 sources that I briefed you last week, or last session, were the sources of my ideas for targets that I can prepare so that when the conditions are right, I can execute. And then I can continually assess the results in order to make sure that I'm doing plan, prepare, and execute correctly. And that system of the hybrid swing system on 30-minute charts since the start of the year has pulled out more than 200 R every month for 9 months in a row. I'm trading that at a level of risk that is so small that I'm getting reliable bits and pieces of money that allows me to meet my goals and objectives. And I want to trade at smaller levels of risk with more opportunities so that I can think like the house in Las Vegas. That's my mindset of industrial production. I'm not trying to find the one perfect trade. That's the one, and then put maximum money on that because I have absolute confidence that I can predict success. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a large set of shorter term opportunities, the herd, and watch them go through their life cycles so that I always got a sufficient number of things to trade on this long journey, which I know is going to go through times when the market looks like this, and other times it looks like this, and other times it looks like that, and other times it looks like this. And then it goes through those cycles of volatility. That's why I study volatility. That's why I study price action within certain look-back periods, because I know that when things are abnormally oversold or abnormally overbought or absolutely quiet right in the middle, that from those three areas in price, come on, dummy. Amazing moves can occur, all out of proportion to the last little bit that led up in there. The guys in the middle can break out in either direction, the Z3P, for example. And I know that if I look at multiple time frames, the 10-day, the 30-day, and the 150-day, that each one of those has groups of people who are trying to optimize just in there. And that when all three of those line up, that you can get an extraordinary move, because now you have three independent populations of people that are going to be surprised when this thing, which was rising, now suddenly collapses. And then the amount of fear maximizes. Well, that's the sniper trading technique. And so I want to conclude by simply saying that I believe that you must simultaneously be expanding your width and also expanding your depth as you are increasing your understanding of this infinitely complex open market, which is continually expanding as new things happen, that the market itself is expanding and moving through time and space. So, in my view, it's not enough just to increase your width and dabble with new concepts, although you have to do that to stay fresh. But you also have to be selectively deep so that you can perform to make money in production. So that's what I want to say about where we are in the foundations course. So since most of you guys are in a new cohort and just getting exposed, you just need to know that if you don't ask me a detailed question, then I feel like it's time to expand your width, to make you question things, to expose you to other ideas from different angles, to get you out of your comfort zone. But as you look at what I'm doing with the hybrid swing, or as I say things about supported spring crossing, and you want to start trading those things, that your questions are going to take on the form of specific questions about a system or a concept, then I know that you're working on depth by the nature of the question that you ask me. And then that tells me what it is that I need to reply with. If you don't give me questions, you're going to get stuff like you did today, or I'm going to talk about things that were coming out of the nightly podcasts. The nightly podcasts, you're going to see me coaching guys on their little charts. And I see things that are common to a lot of them that are kicking their butt. And it's usually because the market is behaving in a certain way, and they're trading it in a certain way, and the intersection of the market and their system, it's either working really well or it's not working well, and they're getting frustrated, or they're missing opportunity. I say, so that gives me an opportunity to talk. A lot of times if I see consistency of friction, then that becomes a topic that I talk about on the nightly podcast. And if it's that persistent, I may talk about it in the foundations course if you don't ask me questions. But if you ask me questions, I'm going to start there. And I may end up trying to connect it to what I'm seeing in the market. So the foundations Q&A and the creativity Q&A are a way to stay dynamically connected to a complex market and to help us with both our width and our depth. And you're going to see that in those Q&As. And that's why every Q&A session is kind of different than any of the other ones, because it's always driven by the needs of the moment, the questions that are asked, the circumstances of the market, or insights that I've had from working with a lot of traders in the current markets, and things that I'm learning about my own trading as we go. Like 2 months ago, I think I coined the term, and I'm going to conclude with this because we got the Creativity 202 course. But I was noticing a lot of these circumstances where the market would have made a move, and then in the close, it looked like this after a really nice run up, and then there might be a large gap down. And that means that the RL10 would have gotten into the winter very quickly. And then the hybrid frog kind of strategy like this was working really well to do this back to this price level. A return to fair value. And that if that worked, it might continue whatever that previous move was. So I might be willing to get leg 1 and leg 2 and call this the tactical space, which is simply a return to previous fair value routinely to take advantage of the fact that there was an abnormally large move to the downside, that all of these guys who were bullish would interpret this as a buy on dip, and so they were motivated to buy right here because they saw that with this amount of risk they could get 1, 2, or 3. So that made a large gap down after a nice bull, a shock to the system, and set this up. But I also knew that maybe there was some reason why that thing failed, so that if it fell below this little part of the risk box from the open, this could lead to a surprise. And on day 1 of that move, after a nice long swing, we might get a range stat move to the downside because of the shock and awe, and then fear that they were going to lose their greedy gains would lead to increasing volatility. And sometimes that one-day range stat move might lead to a day two move. And now suddenly what I had was a swing trade that started off with two huge counter trend days. Well, I know how to trade both of those intraday in a disciplined way, but now suddenly this was starting to look like a hybrid swing system. So I've been trading that way formally all year, just because the 2 years previous to that it was working, and it was working well enough during COVID. Why was it working? Because of what I said before about pre-COVID volatility looked like this, and post-COVID volatility looks like that. That's been true, and hybrid swing has been crushing it for 3 to 4 years. And in response to COVID and everybody locked in, that's when I started doing the Nightly Strategy podcast, so that people were not disconnected from other humans. And that actually led to a whole, just doing the nightly podcast, the first month, that was brutal. But I didn't have anything else to do, because COVID we were teaching from home. So that actually helped me. And then that actually helped me develop sniper trading. It helped me develop the Charlie 202 course, which has led to sniper trading, the Godzilla and all that stuff. Well, all this stuff is connected if you have a continuous improvement mindset and you communicate to each other, that you use the power of the tribe and develop the professional language with artifacts that we can leverage. So all you got to do is find where you are and start exploring, know where your skills are, and don't be afraid to venture into the unknown, because you know how to do that with low risk. And you're going to learn how to learn in order to increase our knowledge. That's the journey that we're kind of on. So those are the things that I wanted to say. I would also just say, to complete this thought over here, that you don't have to trade the large gaps like immediately from the open. You can afford to let that thing become a follow-through intraday harsh winter, and then and only then set up the SSC, the Collapsing Dragon, and the Kata 2. Like, you can give it the harsh winter. Because if there was a large gap and a harsh winter, that thing is in play incontrovertibly. Not only were the overnight guys getting punished and being rewarded, but also the intraday guys are being punished and rewarded. If you have a big gap and a harsh winter, that move isn't done. That follow-through is going to be large enough to trade the rest of the day. Like, you don't have to stay with the other things and then force them to become big wins. Like, you don't have to take on the responsibility of making it move by you trading. You don't have to do that job. You can find all the other people that are, where is the herd stampeding? When a herd stampedes and has some temporary pause at the watering hole where support and resistance meet, I should say where resistance and support meet, the very fact that there were huge moves tells you that that is just a temporary rest halt. And it's either going to be a return to this level, or it's going to be a continuation of that. Whatever caused that. Whatever caused it doesn't matter. Simply the fact that it did that is enough. And this is why we look for the smallest yellow zone. And if you can listen to last sessions and realize that we have a number of choices on finding the manageable risk box. You can be consistent with that. Start with the idea of the PSAR flip box. And then adjust that to be either bigger or smaller to your skill level. But get started with that now with forward paper trading, just so that you can start feeling the difference that those box sizes make. Not so that you can just quickly make money, it's so that you can experience the effect of that style of thinking. That's how you stretch. If this is what you're comfortable with, and I'm over here trying to tell you from my experience, these things are worthwhile. If that's not in your experience and you start trying to, of course it's going to feel awkward. Did you learn how to tie your shoe perfectly after watching your mom do it once? No. Did you learn how to talk, etc.? So we learn through a series of successive approximations with lots of feedback, with lots of repetitions. Remember what it's like to learn and how it feels. And learn to turn the feelings of weakness into a source of strength, because now you know you're in an area where you have the maximum opportunity to learn. That's what I want to say. All right, that's everything I got for today. I want to take a 2-minute break so we can get restarted with the Creativity 202 guys. So I'm going to listen to their out brief. You are invited to listen if you want. But we're going to shift to them telling their stories, which is what the Creativity 202 course is. Foundations, I'm kind of telling you what to do, and you learn and you come back and ask questions. Creativity 202, they progress to the point where they've done homework on certain small experiential learnings and are now coming back to report on what the most significant insights were. Wherever that leads us is where we go. But it's much more about them and their insights, and not as much me being directive. That's called the gradual release of responsibility, where in early stages the teacher takes on more responsibility and is more directive, but is weaning the student off of the teacher so that the student can become their own self-directed teacher. And then I change into a resource provider or a guide or just a co-conspirator in your own learning. That's called the gradual release of responsibility model of adult learning and professional learning. That's how we actually get the most out of our community of practice, is by having a lot of independent thinkers come back and report on the things they're discovering that are associated with the concepts that we're teaching. I find that tremendously exciting. Because I find it tremendously exciting, I end up talking about it quite a bit. And sometimes you just want to know what time it is and not necessarily the theory of making watches. That's why I need your focused questions when it's time for that. That's why I asked Phil and Griff to give us that Kata 2 boot camp with detailed coaching and structure to really lock in those 3 patterns. And that's why we priced it to allow for that in a feasible way. Remember the Foundations course, you have lifetime access to it. And I'm training those guys to continue to carry on in my absence so that we don't lose the momentum of this thing. And I want you to feel confident that we're in it for the long haul. It's a long way to Tipperary, and we're going to be ready for that. At the same time, we need to learn our proficiencies in the things that are working right now, and that's what the Kata 2 stuff is doing. So that's everything I want to say. And I'm going to do a quick checkout and release the hounds. Say thanks for hanging in there, and keep sending your questions. You don't have to wait till like the day before or the morning of. The sooner you send me the questions, the better my answer, I hope, will be. And the sooner I can get you an answer to. So that's everything I got. You guys take good care. Hamad, I'm glad to see you made it home safe. Again, you're on my prayer list, and whatever power prayer has, it's working for you. We'll see. I'm an optimist. Take good care, guys. And I'll see the Creativity 202 guys here shortly.
Take care. Thank you.
I'm just glad I remembered to push record before I start talking. I went back and said, God, I hope I remembered to record that. And if I didn't, I would just get to say it again. So, that's a win-win situation. I'll be right back.